Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Hello, and welcome to the Proactive Caregiving Podcast. As a CPA with over 20 years as an industry accountant, Jessica stepped away from the corporate world to become a full-time caregiver for her mother. Having learned invaluable lessons along the way, she is now here to share those with you and to invite you to join her on this caregiver's journey. Here is your host, Jessica Cannon.
Hello, everybody. I'm so glad you're here with me today. I am the Proactive Caregiver, and I specialize in educating others on how to be proactive by empowering you, the caregiver. If you cannot take care of yourself, then you cannot take care of your loved one. So today, we're going to talk about caregiver spirituality with my guest, Samone Smith. Samone is a dear friend of mine and fellow caregiver that I was blessed to meet a few years ago when she stepped into our home as one of Mom's senior companions. I felt so much peace on the days she came to visit, not just because she was relieving me for a couple of hours to recharge, but because she spoke of her life in such a way it helped me to refocus my faith at times. Because many of you may experience, caregiving has the potential to create moments that distract us from living those purposeful journeys. The interesting thing to me, and it makes more sense now after these years of knowing Samone, is that Samone's healthcare journey actually began at the early age of 15 when her first job was in a nursing home. There she found a passion for caring for seniors and those with disabilities. As a junior in high school, she received a certification as a nurse assistant. From this early age, a long, fulfilling journey of caring for people from all walks of life was born. Now, being a mother of a teenage son with Down syndrome, she already understood the importance of compassion and faith-based intentions. Samone has over 20 years of healthcare experience that includes Geriatric Care, Oncology, Rehabilitation, Dementia Care, Hospice, and various other special needs. In 2011, Samone founded a Kingdom Women Walking in Victory ministry. As a self-proclaimed victory strategist to women, she knows exactly how to help women turn their defeat into victory. Since then, her spirit-led journey has helped her focus on writing and publishing 2 books. The first is titled From Defeat to Victory, The Victorious Woman Journal. This led her in 2018 to launch From Defeat to Victory Services, where she offers life coaching, online classes, spiritual mentoring, and workshops. Her second book, titled Flaws, 5 Steps to Radical Self-Care, will be released soon. Samone's spiritual guidance took her as a native from St. Louis, Missouri, to Austin, Texas, long enough for us to meet. Thankfully, her caregiving journey has given Samone an unshakable faith. She was then guided to Houston, Texas, shortly thereafter, where she currently resides with her new husband, Alan. She is the mother of 2 boys, has 3 bonus daughters, and 2 bonus grandchildren. So thank you so much for coming on with me today, Samone. I really appreciate it.
Jessica, oh my God, I have tears in my eyes. I am literally about to cry. Thank you so much for the introduction, allowing me to look into myself and all that God has done. And thank you for inviting me to your podcast today.
Absolutely. You know, when you and I had a conversation, a so brief conversation the other day, it was just one of those spiritual guidances. I had been thinking about you, and when you called and we actually had a chance to talk, I thought, oh my goodness, that is a podcast. Just listening to you and hearing how your spiritual guidance and the transformative processes you have been going through, it just resonated so much with me. So we had to do this.
Wow. I'm excited.
So before we go into some of the other details I mentioned, we wanted to kind of let people know that years ago, when Mom was living with me, I needed some additional help. And one of the services we went through, that's how it came to be, where I was blessed and was fortunate to meet you. And since then, we've been able to stay in touch. And I'm glad, because even though Mom's memory is not as good, you touched me and my heart in such a way that I want other listeners to hear and understand, because you have become such a great example of what it means to walk authentically in this life and what faith-based life looks like.
Yes, wow. You know, God is so awesome. And I can say that during the time I was caring for your mom, which was such a blessing for me, you have no idea. It was definitely a faith walk. At that time, as you know, I was going through I had divorced, recently divorced. And so at the time when I began caring for your mom, before that, I was actually working at a pretty decent job. And one night I was working night shift, which is kind of what I done the last few years when married to my ex-husband. He kind of worked days. I worked nights because we were raising, boys,
Right.
school age children. And so I divorced, and of course things changed. I was living in the city. I didn't have family. I had a few people that I kind of met in the community, and that was a support to me, but I didn't have any family. And I knew that going back to St. Louis was not what I was supposed to do. And so I was working this night job, and it kind of worked for a minute, but I can remember my last week, I had this feeling of I cannot keep working nights.
Yeah.
It was one night I sat and I didn't have any other job, and I wrote my letter of resignation.
Wow.
And I just knew that I had to do it. And I sat there, I wrote in that letter of resignation. Shortly after that, I left the job. And so it was the job offer that I had I hadn't been in home care in so long, but it was such a humbling experience for me, even taking a pay cut, just doing what I had to do, because I just knew that I needed to be home with my kids.
Right.
And so it was your family that they connected me with, and another family that really kept me going and was a blessing to me, and it kept me encouraged. And so coming to play Scrabble with your mom and making her coffee and having these conversations with her were like the highlights of my day. And so that's kind of where I was in that moment. And so even to be here, even on this call, further lets me know that God is in control and that He has always been in control.
Yes.
And so I didn't expect to be so full right now, but I am really, it just caused me to really reflect on some things and to see God's faithfulness. So yeah, that was a great time, a humbling time, but yet a great time for me.
Absolutely. Talk about that leap of faith. I mean, most people stay tied to jobs because they can't imagine doing anything else, or sometimes finding the next thing is a little bit more difficult, especially in recent times. But that was a major leap of faith to say, Lord, I'm jumping and I know you're going to catch me.
Yes. My favorite scripture have always been Matthew 6 and 33. Seek ye first the kingdom and its righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. And Romans 8 and 28, where it says, paraphrasing, he works all things out for our good. And I stand
Mhm.
on those two scriptures through
Yes.
whatever I'm going through. And so what I did know that God had led me to Texas,
Hmm.
even though I didn't see a divorce coming with that, but God did.
Right.
And so I knew that I was right where I needed to be. And so therefore I knew that if God, if he would not send you anywhere and not provide for you. And
Right.
so I always stood on that, and I continue to stand on that. And so it's always my faith that keeps me going. And one thing about God and truly living for Him is that one thing lead to another. And so if I
Hmm.
had enough faith to move to another city,
Hmm.
surely I have to have enough faith to leave a job for the sake of my kids
Right.
and trust God. And so, that's faith.
And that's why it was so important to me as we got to know each other and seeing how you were living your life and how strong and how firm you stood in your faith, because it made me really take that look back inside, because I took that leap of faith and I left the corporate world, but I wasn't at that time, I wasn't the single mother that you were becoming. And so that leap of faith was also after being in the corporate world, doing the accounting for so many years, that was part of my identity. And so stepping away from that was so incredibly difficult. And where I tried to find peace in, well, now I'm blessed with more time with mom, there were so many moments that just I didn't understand when I first stepped into. So there was a lot of frustration, a lot of anger, a lot of disconnect, and missing that identity that I stepped away from. But it's like you said, having that faith that where he leads you, if you're willing to go where he's leading you, then you can expect to have something far greater than you stepped away from.
Absolutely. And as you said that, it makes me think about, the identity.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, my story is a lot different from yours. For me, I grew up in a really good home and all of that, two
Mm-hmm.
parent home and all of that good stuff. And like I said, I began working at an early age.
Mm-hmm.
And so my junior year, I can remember I went to a technical high school. And so at technical schools, they have these trades.
Mm-hmm.
And so the word health occupation stood out to me. I had no idea that I was about to be certified as a nurse's aide, and, I would be able to find a job. Most of my friends were working at fast food places and clothing stores. And so me getting that certification was a part of my credits. And
Oh,
so when I went to school, my junior year, I went to school maybe from 7:30 in the morning to maybe 10:30, and I worked evening shift. So I
wow.
worked like 2:30 to 10:30, and that was
Wow.
how I got my credits. And so I say that it was a good and a bad thing. Well,
Right.
God worked it out for my good. It really wasn't good for me at that time
Mm-hmm.
because I was young. I was making money that most of my friends were not making.
Mm-hmm.
There were so many opportunities as far as jobs. I was really smart in school. I had scholarships. My parents don't come from a college background, even though, my dad always had a really good job, but they didn't come from that college background. So they didn't push me. It was kind of, leaving things up to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was working a really decent jobs at my age. I was able to get things that I wanted, car. Eventually I ended up getting an apartment. And so,
Nice.
I say it was good and bad for me because it kind of made me lazy to going away for college, even though I had some college, but I didn't graduate. But it put me in a work mindset,
Mm.
and so that was the downfall of it. Although it blessed me later in life, it still was it was kind of a downfall early on. because I didn't continue my education and things like that. And so when I did give my life over to Christ, I came to him at a place where I had just been kind of going through trials of life and, just so many things happening, gave my life over to him. So at that point, I didn't really have an identity, whereas maybe if I had went to college and got a certain degree, I could have been, kind of wrapped up in that, but that wasn't my story. So I was looking for identity. That's kind of how my journey and my relationship with God started. And I didn't grow up like in a household where, God was everything. I was an adult, when I began to develop my relationship. And so I was kind of looking for identity. I was searching for who I was in him, who I was as a woman. I came with feelings of regret of not going to college, not having this and not having that. So I came to him with all of that, and so like he always do, he just worked those things out for my good, and so I had to let go the feelings of feeling not accomplished and feeling as if I missed opportunities. I came to him and I had to let go of those feelings that were really holding me back and was causing depression in my life as an adult. So hopefully that makes sense to those that are listening and that can maybe relate.
And the way, what I hear from that is it's amazing how he connects us, because what I've been seeing more recently is how God connects us with people, whether, their strength helps our weakness and vice versa. And the idea of identity, part of my struggle was being so ingrained in who I thought I was and who I was trying to make myself become. And so totally losing sight of who really is in control.
Well, yeah.
And so that's why it's interesting to me that, and I can totally see that how working at such an early age, yes, it instills so many skills, but you had some long hours at that age to work. And to me, it seems like he kept you safe. He was giving you early on skill set that was going to carry through the rest of your life and become part of his plan that he has for you and the lives that he intended for you to touch and
absolutely
become that example for them. Because it is that thing, when we talk to our sons about what are they going to do when they grow up and how to manage their own lives, there is that conversation that comes up of college, military, trade schools, or, finding their own way somehow, somewhere. And then we put those pressures on them of, you got to find something that gives you retirement and something that gives you benefits and something that gives you all these kind of things. And when we go in pursuit of that, at least what I experienced, the first thing that kind of gets left in the rear view mirror is God's hands in my life and our lives. And so it's interesting now on this flip side, just seeing the similarities and the differences and how he uses all of that to where we still came together and we still were able to connect.
Absolutely. And I have to say that because I have had an opportunity of connecting with so many people on so many levels, just from working in the healthcare field. I have wonderful doctor friends, wonderful nurse friends, wonderful, like all type of people, all types of walks of life. And so it's all of that I see when I reflect, and I'm like, God, wow, you are so good, because all of those moments led me right to where I am.
Right.
So it is amazing how God works. And I think that's where the importance of purpose come in at. And, even as parents, sometimes we don't do things totally right. We do things trying to use our own understanding or whatever the case. But, we do have to be mindful that God do have a specific purpose for us. And so oftentimes that purpose don't look like what we may have planned. You
Exactly.
know, sometimes our purpose look like where is the most money,
Right.
where is the biggest retirement,
Mm-hmm.
and so those are things that purpose is what we have to keep in mind. And so I try to use all of those tools, even with my son, who he expresses a desire of wanting to go to college. My junior, my son with Down syndrome, he's a sophomore, and then my oldest son, he's a junior in high school.
Nice.
And so for me, with him, I leave things open.
Mm-hmm.
I tell him, I'm not making you this, making you do this. I'm not making you that. You can do whatever you desire to do. Pray, make
Mm-hmm.
sure you're doing what you feel is in your heart to do. And so my conversation with my son is a lot different from the
Mm-hmm.
conversations that were had with me, because
Right.
ultimately I want him to follow the path that God has for him, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell them often, you're not living a life to please me. You're not living a life to please your dad or your grandparents. You're living a life to please God and yourself,
Absolutely.
and so always be true to yourself. You want to go to college, we're going to do all we can do to make sure you do. If you don't feel that's the thing for you, well, we're going to think about some other options,
Mm-hmm.
and so because I did come from a technical high school, my last 2 years of high school, I'm all for trade schools. I'm all for
Yes.
trade
Exactly.
because college is not for everyone,
Mm-mm.
you know.
No.
And me just going to being certified as a junior in high school really afforded me the opportunity to do so many things, work with so many people, and so I'm grateful for that, and
Yeah.
I can give God glory for that, because like I said, when I was searching for identity, I was so depressed about, oh, I didn't do this and I didn't finish college and I didn't do that. So those were my biggest darkest days,
Mm.
until God reassured me that He's going to work things out for my good.
Absolutely. So, what led you to um, write the book From Defeat to Victory then?
From defeat to victory came about. Actually, so when I gave my life over to God, I was maybe late 20s.
Mm.
I'm 42,
Mm-hmm.
so late 20s, I believe 2007 is when I completely rededicated my life. So I was saved where I became a believer early on,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't begin to really live for Him until 2007. And maybe you can or cannot relate, but I remember at the time when I began living my life for God, and I wanted to live right, and I wanted to, serve in church and do all of these things that I felt that I should be doing. And when you are what is considered a babe in Christ, it's kind of intimidating to
Mm-hmm.
come into a building and you see all of these people that look a lot more mature than you, a lot more knowledgeable, a lot more, what's the word? Just more mature,
Right.
you know. And so I can remember that feeling of just really feeling like a baby and feeling like I don't really know the Bible and I don't know these things. And so God took that time, He really began to grow me up. And so I came in feeling one way, and you could probably relate. I stayed a while, and then I realized that that wasn't the case. And so it's like, okay, God, what is this? What are you doing? And so, I just realized that these people that I saw as more mature, more advanced, more godly, I
Mm-hmm.
realized that that wasn't the case. And so for me, I mean, I had such a heart to want to live for God, and I was so serious about my walk to the point where I was just devastated that that's what it was. And I'm like, God, what is this? And so instead of allowing that to discourage me, I remember the Lord saying to me, I'm going to use all of this. And so because my attention was solely on Him,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't allow myself to be distracted by the stuff around me. And so I used that time to get in my word. I served in the church. I served wholeheartedly. I prayed, God, what do you want me to do? I was in that stage. What do you want me to do? What do you want me to
Mm-hmm.
serve? And so he used that time to really grow me up, and he was showing me how not to be. Unfortunately,
I like
he
that.
was showing me how not to be, and he was also showing me what was really missing in the body of Christ. And so this revelation came over a period of time, because I was so discouraged many times, many weeks. I was so discouraged. And so when he began to make that clear to me, I began to understand my assignment. And so my later years were a lot better than the beginning years, because I was focused. I knew what God wanted me to do. I knew that there was purpose in it. And
Right.
so I kind of walked out my own process of spiritual transformation. And at the end of the process, it was like if God said, okay, now go back and show other people how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can remember being in my car. At this time, I was working in hospice, and I was a telecommuter. So I was in the car, spent a lot of time in the car. And so I was in the car, and I would never forget. And I was praying, and I'm like, okay, God, how am I going to do this? And I can just remember him dropping in my spirit to write a book. And I'm like, write a book. And it was so strong. I got out of my car. I parked at the nearest park. I got out of my car, and I just remember like just praising him, because this is years later. So it was 2007 when I joined the church. I wrote the book maybe in 2012 is when I wrote the book, although I didn't publish it until maybe a year or two later.
Hmm.
Because as soon as I put the last dot to it, as soon as it was done, and I'm like, oh my God, finally, I'm thinking I was going to begin my book signings and this and that. And the Lord clearly was like, now you're going to focus on Kingdom Women Walking in Victory. At the time, it was Christian Women Walking in Victory.
Mm-hmm.
And so as soon as I finished the book, that is when Kingdom Women Walking in Victory was born.
Interesting.
And so my women's ministry. And at that time, it was a group of women that was just kind of in my circle that witnessed my walk.
Mm-hmm.
And they just kind of connected and joined in. And it was maybe 8 or 9 women. And that's how Kingdom Women Walk in Victory started. So once I finished the book, sharing my own spiritual process of spiritual transformation,
Mm-hmm.
then I focused on Kingdom Women Walking in Victory.
And helping
And so,
others. That's awesome. And that's, when I think about the moments I had one woman that asked me, do you know what your purpose in life is? And I think I was like 39 at the time, 38 or 39. And at that point I was like, I honestly don't know. And she had asked me, why haven't you asked him yet? And I was like, I'm afraid of the answer. Because taking that leap of faith to walk in his steps, or try to walk the have a life in Christ, is sometimes easier than it sounds, and sometimes it's harder than we expect. And so it's beautiful that he worked with you the way he did and touched your heart in such a way that now you turn around and you help others who are maybe not walking the same exact walk of life that you have gone through, but similar situations that made them feel and have a lot of the resentment and regret that you had experienced. And now seeing someone else survive in a sense, or turn it around to be in a better way and a better light. That's what we look for. I think that's why we sometimes people fantasize or follow certain individuals that give them that kind of that sense of success or that sense of knowledge, but sometimes it ends up being the wrong way to go and the wrong thing or person to follow. So having someone that provides that example it's great. I can see now that part of his grand plan and how you fit in his grand plan.
Absolutely.
So as you're going through this transformation in life, I think And this is another reason why I felt like we needed to have this conversation, because you and I both had some major health issues this year. And it's interesting because I didn't turn over my life in such a way until I was 40. I didn't choose to be baptized until I was 40. I kept thinking my parents baptized me, raised in a Catholic family. I was baptized at birth, so that means I don't have to do this. It was done for me. And so choosing this for myself it felt like that was the beginning of my transformation. Although it wasn't, when I reflect on it, I feel like that wasn't the beginning. That was a very pivotal point in it, that he's been chasing after me all my life, basically. And it took the change in health sometimes to really capture even more of my attention. So what was happening for you earlier this year that kind of created that pivotal point in your transformation?
So earlier this year, I was going through lots of physical symptoms, as far as just being fatigue, as far as just having headaches and just female problems and becoming anemic. I've never been a sickly person at all. Just all of these symptoms that were coming up. It's like, what is going on with me? Going back and forth to my primary doctor, running labs and tests and being told, well, it's not this, where you're fine. And I'll go back like, okay, now, doctor, something is wrong. And so my last visit to my primary doctor, she referred me to a OB doctor to see if maybe I was dealing with fibroids. So because some other symptoms came up that made her kind of feel like, okay, now maybe this is this. And so she referred me to an OB doctor. I made my appointment with her, and we did the ultrasounds, and it was confirmed that I was dealing with multiple fibroids. And so, of course, it was that relief of finally knowing what's wrong. And awesome doctor, God is so good. Her name is Dr. Peace. I'm giving her a shout out. Dr. Peace Nuego Banks is her name. Dr. Peace said it all for me. She gave me several options of how to go about it. She wasn't forcing me into having a hysterectomy or this, if she was very supportive in whatever I wanted to do. So of course I wanted to try some things naturally first. Surgery was nowhere on my mind.
Right.
So it was like, okay, well, if I have to change some eating habits to feel better, then I'm willing to do that. And so I'm trying all of these things. The changing of eating habits didn't work. And so I tried another option of getting I believe the Mirena, some type of birth control. And so this was going to be the next step that I was going to do. And so the day before my appointment was scheduled, they called and canceled it because whatever they needed hadn't come in. And so they canceled it. I'm like, okay, I was kind of excited and ready to get something going, but it's like, okay, whatever. So a friend called, and when she called, I said, girl, I had 3 appointments today and all of my appointments were canceled. And, I was telling her about the Moreno. And as soon as I said that word, she said, don't do the Moreno.
Oh, wow.
I was like, okay, wow. So she kind of explained. She had just went through the same thing a year prior. So she kind of explained some things. And so that was enough to make me feel like, okay, well, that wasn't meant to be. With that, I'm like, okay, God, what do I need to do? And so the hysterectomy kept coming into my spirit. And so I said, okay, God, please, I need to know what is the connection of a hysterectomy? Like, what's that a spiritual meaning to that,
Yeah.
And so I just kind of Googled it. And there was a blog that came up, and that blog was just like my confirmation. And so in the blog, this lady, she was just sharing her experience and symptoms that she was going through. Even during the time of my physical symptoms, I was also battling with things that happened in childhood, just family stuff. Like I was just going through, like mentally,
Wow.
I was emotional about so many things. And so she was kind of explaining this, and she shared how her hysterectomy ultimately led up to her spiritual awakening process. And
Amazing.
so that was just enough for me. That was my confirmation. And
Mm-hmm.
so it was with that I said, okay, I'm going to call the doctor and make an appointment and let her know that I'm deciding to have the hysterectomy. And so from reading that blog, making the appointment to actually going and telling my doctor that I was deciding to do the hysterectomy, I had so much peace. Even my doctor was like, "Oh my God, you have so much peace." And I said, "I do. I know that this is for me. This is something that I need to do." We just kind of, I knew I had some things coming up that I really didn't want to miss. I had some things on the calendar. My retreat with KWWIB, for one,
Mm-hmm.
was at the end of July. My anniversary was coming, and so I'm like, what does the healing process look like? And so we just kind of talked about those things, and everything just worked out perfectly as far as my healing, as far as the retreat happened. It was successful. My body, I'm feeling better and better every day. I have lots of
Good.
weight gain, but I'm not even concerned about that. I'm working on it. My anniversary was wonderful, and so it turned out to be the one of the best decisions that I could have made, and I was totally against having the hysterectomy.
Mm.
And so that's just one of those things where we have to trust God, and when
Mm-hmm.
you can't get too many opinions,
Right.
and you have to kind of do what's best for you. That's kind of what I did, and it worked out for me.
It's
And I'm so
interesting.
glad I did,
You,
which was hard, being a
yes.
caregiver,
Mm-hmm.
being a mom, being a wife. It was hard, but I definitely grew through that. I had so much peace. I let things just kind of be.
Mm-hmm.
My husband stepped up, the boys stepped up, and so no complaints. I didn't allow myself to. I'm not going to say I didn't have my days. I'm not
You're
going to say
right,
that.
right.
I had my days.
Mm-hmm.
Will you guys clean out the refrigerator? This is the day I clean the refrigerator. But it was good, and it was definitely another growth, another
Mm-hmm.
part of my growth process and spiritual transformation as well. I say my second awakening.
Mm.
It definitely pushed me into another intimate level with God, another level of trusting in
Mm-hmm.
Him, and not only trusting in Him, but learning to trust myself.
Right. That's big.
And so, yes.
That is very big. And it's interesting when no sooner you said that a minute ago, learning to trust in God, the word trust came into my mind right as you were saying it just before. Because that's
Mhm.
part of this process when you reach this beginning of your transformation or the beginning of your awakening. For me, and I don't want to speak for you, but that level of fear sometimes will surface, and it
Yes.
pushes trust aside, and trying
Mhm.
to let go and not be in control of certain things. I mean, the
Mhm.
it's interesting because I had a similar with the surgery. I didn't want the surgery. I tried to
Mhm.
find all kinds of ways to get away from it, and alternatives, workout regimens, and other things, food, like you said, just things that would help me um, avoid surgery. And when it came down to it, it was trust that the surgeon knows exactly what there needs to be done and will be able to do it, and that the recovery will not be the worst case scenario kind of things. They give you the risks,
Mhm.
and because they have to inform you, and that adds to some of the fear, but it really comes back to the trust in
Mhm.
his way. I mean, and that's the tricky part of all of this. Just like as the caregiver stepping in, there's your loved ones are on a journey. They're on a journey that you have no idea which way it's going to go, but you have to trust that you're there at that point in time for a reason to do a specific thing. And then he'll bring you through, just like he brought you through the surgery after the fact.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I totally agree. It definitely all comes down to trust. You
Yes.
know, because you don't know the outcome of the surgery. You don't know, how your body is going to take it. You don't know, you just
Hmm.
have so many questions. So it is that fear that can hold us back from making the decision that we need to make.
Right. So I can only imagine that this is part of what, maybe not all, but part of what has contributed to your second book, Flaws, The 5 Steps to Radical Self-Care. Because you definitely sounds like you were in search of and needing radical self-care at this point.
Absolutely. And the thing about it is that I thought, because this book, this is a 3-year process of writing this book.
Wow.
And so it started, of course, with my divorce. And so it was that when I began my true self love journey going through a divorce.
Hmm.
And so that's how the book really came about. And so maybe last year, I'm working on the book, and I'm like, okay, God, why is it so hard for me to get this book done? And so by the end of 2020 is when I realized, okay, I need more self care. Like,
Mm.
I have to go to a whole nother level of self care. I had that revelation at the end of 2020. And so 2021 is when things began to kind of shake up.
Mm.
Things were shaking up for me. And so it ultimately led me to a deeper level of self care. And
Well,
so now I'm finally at that place where I can say, okay, now I see, now I get it. I have more content
mm-hmm.
for the book. And so I'm excited and I'm confident that I will soon be releasing the book. I'm going for my birthday, which is December 3rd, to be my
Nice.
release date. So not official, but that's what I'm pushing for at
Right,
this time.
right. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you. I know.
So, as you've gone through this process, one of the things that we started to talk about was really digging into this spiritual transformation and finding the difference between, or at least feeling and experiencing a difference between being spirit led versus being religious.
Mm.
You want to touch on
What's
that one
that?
for me?
Well, I can tell you this. Um, Going through a divorce is a very difficult thing.
Yes, I
And
agree.
it's more difficult when you are religious and when you come from religious institutes and
Mm-hmm.
when you are, having these religious activities. And
Right.
so I was going through a divorce at the time. I'm an ordained minister,
Mm-hmm.
leading a women's ministry. That's two things right there. That's like, okay,
Exactly.
what? That was the most difficult for me. And so I had to get to a place where I got to a place and it was like, okay, God, I don't need another opinion from
Mm.
anybody. I
Yeah.
don't need another counselor. I don't need none of that.
Yep.
I need to know what you want me to do in this situation. And it's in that moment when God spoke a clear word for me, giving me confirmation of going forward with my divorce, because that was a hard thing when you're used to hearing God hates divorce,
Mm-hmm.
this
Yeah.
and that. And so it was when God spoke to my heart and confirmed what I needed to do. And so from that, I went full speed ahead. And I think that started my journey of letting go of a religious mindset. I didn't know at the
Right.
time, but what I do know about myself is that I strive every day to please God and not people. And that him helping me through that situation and just seeing how he worked everything out in the my divorce situation helped me to really understand him more and not with a religious mindset. And I
Right.
lost some people in the process of it, but when it was all said and done, I said, okay, people that know me, they know me. I don't have to
Right.
explain myself to people that know me. And
Exactly.
those that question me or whatever the case may be, just let them fall to the wayside. And so that's what happened. I moved on with my life, and like I said, it caused me to love God just even more and to see him in a more spiritual light and not a religious light. He's bigger than I
Yes.
hate divorce, therefore don't divorce. He's
Exactly.
bigger than that. And so that started my journey, my spiritual journey. And from then on, um, just a multiple things. Even right before the pandemic, God was dealing with me about some things as it relates to church and the building. And it was when the pandemic happened where it was confirmation of, okay, now you see what I'm talking about? Because I was already in this space already with the church. And I don't want to get too much into it. It's a whole nother thing, but I was already in a particular space, and that just allowed me to see again how big God is. He's bigger than a building. He's
Right.
bigger than us going to a building every Sunday or a Bible study
Absolutely.
every Wednesday. He is so much bigger than that. And so that pushed me further into my journey. So just all of these little things have just been pushing me further and further into trusting in him and him alone.
Hmm.
And one thing I had to let go of, I had to get to the root of, okay, why is it so hard for me to make certain decisions? And there was a time where I would say, I'm not a people pleaser. I'm not a people pleaser. But he began to show me how I was a people
Mm.
pleaser. I was allowing other people's thoughts of me to dictate what I do.
Right.
And so this was early 2020 when he began to show me these things during the pandemic. And so I just allowed my time with him through the pandemic to really build me up,
Good.
um, and to really just strip some things away from me, religion being one of the things. And if you saw that post we conversated about,
Yes.
I had a mindset and I would say, oh, I hate religion. I hate religion. But Holy Spirit really did give me a new perspective. And, he said it's good, religion is good for a time, but
Right.
there is a time where we do have to grow up and trust in God. Sometimes you do have to rely and trust your pastor or trust your spiritual mentor or trust this one. But all of those people should be leading you back to God, a relationship with God.
Right.
And in that relationship, you begin to grow and to mature and to make decisions on your own, because ultimately that's what it's all about. We all have a different journey, and there's a different route that we all must take, but the destination is the same.
Right. Right. And I love the way you say that, because ironically, I had been going through very similar struggles with this, and it's been throughout my life being raised a certain way in the Catholic Church and watching them be one way in church and then be another way
Mm-hmm.
outside of the church. And having friends who, or coworkers or other people in life that didn't share exactly the same views, it creates a lot of inner turmoil. And it does become
Yeah.
that people pleasing, because you want people to, not you in general, but for me, wanted people to like me or appreciate
Mm-hmm.
me or see me for who I am, and still not go running, screaming, or avoiding me because of who I was. And this
Mm-hmm.
spiritual transformation was so incredibly important, because as years went by, it was like, as I was ready, and especially when I did finally chose to be baptized, it was like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
the door's open. She's now open
Mm-hmm.
and ready. And So all these things that she's been running from and hiding from and avoiding, I'm just going to let one thing after the other pop up. And at one point, it seemed like several things popped up all at once. And I was like, boy, is he really testing me now? But it was to show me the difference of no longer relying on a religious state.
Absolutely.
And relying on the spiritual state and what that meant. And so, like, I've had moments where driving, and ironically, I didn't like the silence before. And so I was always going through the radio and switching songs and here and there. And then I got to the point where I would turn the radio off. And that was my quiet time with Jesus, and have my conversations to and from work or to and from the grocery store, and just like lay it out there, and I would feel so much better. And then I started realizing I could ask a question, and then the answer would come in either that night or the coming days ahead, or an event or something would happen that there's my answer. And it just kept circling back to that trust. And it was like, oh, I see this process building, that here's a scenario that I want to give you that you have to experience. And for me, that surgery, I don't know if this was the case for you, but it was that pivotal point that I see you, my child. I know you love me, but you're still not fully trusting in me. And it was like life happened in such a way that I really had to trust. Either I'm going under and I'm not coming back, or I come back and I don't have abilities that I thought I had or want to have for the rest of my life. But there was a level of trust that I really had to place there. And so that difference, and I see it more now. I reflect a lot more than I used to. And I can see more now how he has been pointing out more spiritual moments and less rules and regulation through religion.
Absolutely. And I believe he gives all of us something, some type of opportunity, some type of hardship, some type of, all of these situations and circumstances that we have to face. It's all an opportunity to trust God.
Exactly.
On whatever level you are, whatever level you're already on, it's an opportunity. And so we can experience that. I like to say that it's kind of like resume building. Like we build a resume with God.
Yes.
And so we look at this resume and we look at all of these things that we have done, all of these things he has taken us through. And so it helps you for that next moment, when you have to make a decision. It's like, okay, if he got me through this surgery, then surely he can get me through this.
Right.
And so, that's the mindset. That's why reflection is good, to reflect.
It is.
And think on his goodness.
So when you were talking about going through the divorce and how you felt with that religious mindset, it made me think about other caregivers and decisions that have to be made. Do you think the confusion comes up from what it means to be a child of God or a good Christian, that might add that extra stress on those decisions having to be made by caregivers?
Absolutely. It's about faith, religion, and I don't understand it. Religions say it's kind of like, okay, how don't you have enough faith in God to believe that he can do this? You have enough faith to believe, So, but absolutely, it's that the religion that don't allow you to just be human.
Right.
And to make human decisions, or make, possibly as a caregiver, it can make you feel even afraid to say, I'm just tired today.
Right.
I don't want to do this today. It's like, what? Don't you love your mom? It has nothing to do with my love for my mom,
Right.
So religion don't allow you to just be human, And I believe that freedom and transparency, those things are big for me. Like
Mm-hmm.
one of my core values is transparency. And so I realize that when I'm in any type of situations and I'm not allowed to be transparent or free,
Mm-hmm.
that's very uncomfortable for me. And we know that religion don't necessarily teach you to be transparent. It's that fake it till you make it mentality.
Right. Right.
you know and so we just get used to just operating in fakeness and not
Mm-hmm.
even true faith,
Right.
because you don't want anyone to see your vulnerability. It's
Exactly.
like you're afraid to show the things that you really need healing, the areas where you really need healing or help or whatever. So I'm just glad to be free from it all.
Oh my
That's all I
goodness. Yes. And I totally, again, once again, it's like we're on this parallel journey because I just today, in fact, I was chatting with some friends, texting some friends, and just telling them, I had a situation come up that I asked for prayers, and I never would have done that before. I was too, I don't know, embarrassed or shy to say, there's so many things going on in the world. I'm not going to ask just for this one little thing. What
Yes.
can he do for this one
Hmm.
little thing, or what should he do for this one little thing? And it's that being vulnerable. It's very
Hmm.
scary to be vulnerable. And then once I explained and shared the moment, it
Hmm.
felt different. I felt good. It was like I wasn't hiding something. I wasn't trying to be anything else but a real human who was
Yes,
scared of a pending situation. And the prayers
absolutely.
coming back knowing that someone else gets that and they're there and they love you and just the same. It's a feeling of freedom, release.
Absolutely.
I can be human
Absolutely.
and be vulnerable and not care about being judged.
Hmm. Absolutely. One of the smallest things that I do in helping women are almost like the biggest things. So one thing, so for an example, in religion, for some reason it's always a hairy to do something. Just
Right.
just say if I'm a smoker,
Mm-hmm.
that's my thing and I'm struggling. I really want to stop, but I'm struggling. And religion says you need to stop. You need to, whatever, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so that pressure don't make it any easier
Right. It doesn't.
versus saying to someone, like the main thing whenever anyone that I'm working with, if they're experiencing something, I'm always, you have to give yourself time. Give yourself a time limit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to tell you to just stop. If you're in a relationship, you need to get out of, unless you're being beat or something like that, okay, then you need to just go. But you
Right.
still you have to be in the right frame of mind to make a long lasting decision. It's never good to make a decision when you are emotional, irrational.
Mm-hmm.
You have to make a decision when you're at a calm, have some peace, and then you make a decision. But religion teaches you to just do it, just get rid of it, just stop it, you
Right.
know. But that's not God. He's a graceful God. He's a merciful God,
Mm-hmm.
And so when you give people that grace, and compassion, that's what really helped them to transform or to get out of certain addictions or whatever. Like, sometimes
Right.
you have to sit in it, sometimes you have to allow yourself to just sit in it and feel the emotions of whatever it is. And that's when you can make decisions. But when you try to just hurry up and do something just because religious says this is the wrong thing to do, eventually you're going to go right back to it.
Exactly. You're not really quitting it for yourself or stopping it for yourself. You're stopping it for someone else, which brings us back to the people pleasing and leaves you
Exactly.
being resentful and not
Hmm.
feeling full. You're lonely,
Exactly.
you're empty, and you can't figure out
Hmm.
why. Yeah.
Exactly. Hmm. So I think that's what we all need right now. We all need that right now, just even with everything that's going on. We need to be patient with people. We need to be understanding. We need to learn to listen. You have the vaccinated against the unvaccinated. You have,
Yes.
just so
Yes.
much division, and so this is where I can see more than ever where spiritual maturity is needed
Absolutely.
in the world. That's God's will for all of us to be spiritually and naturally mature,
Yes.
so that we can walk in love and so that we can come and we can grow in faith and grow in knowledge. And that's really what it's about. We need some high vibrating energy. It's so much low. So
Yes.
just it's, oh God, help us all
I
is all I can
know.
say.
I
But
know.
we can only start with ourselves and our household,
Hmm.
and control what we can control.
Exactly.
That's all we can do. Hmm.
That perfectly said. Well said. So, how do our listeners find your books? I know the flaws will be released later, but how do they go about finding From Defeat to Victory at the very least?
They they can definitely find From Defeat to Victory on Amazon. From Defeat to Victory is the numeral two.
Hmm.
From Defeat numeral two Victory. And it's been revised. So if you see the first book, it's in like red, black and white, but the revised book, it's pink, it's more colorful.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
But I think Amazon kind of explains that. They can find it on Amazon as well as my website, fromdefeattovictory.com. My website is under construction. Hopefully by the end of the week it will be up and running, but I'm on social media sites as well. Instagram, From Defeat to Victory _ LLC. Facebook, From Defeat to Victory, and Samone Smith. You can find me in all of those places.
Okay. And we'll definitely be sure to post it on the blog so that people can find the information um, as it gets updated as well. So, Samone, this has been great. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your journey with us. I really appreciate you. And I'm so glad we were able to connect, and
Thank you so
how
much.
brief that phone call was, but it meant so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I had no idea how the conversation would go, but I am absolutely blessed by this conversation today. And I hope that there's someone out there that's blessed by it as well.
I had my questions lined up for you, but you know what? I trusted and I just let it be spirit led.
Wow. Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining in and listening with us today. You can find more about this topic on the blog at jessicalazellcannon.com. I hope this gave you some more food for thought, and until next time, be proactive. Take care, everybody.
Thank you for joining us today. We really hope you've enjoyed this episode. To learn more about proactive caregiving and to hear other episodes of this podcast, please visit www.jessicalazellcannon.com. This podcast is produced by Cannon Light Media, LLC, www.cannonlightmedia.com. Music provided by Chris Paradise.
Mary redeemed a $50,000 cash prize playing Chumba Casino this year.
I was only playing for fun, so winning this was a dream come true.
Chumba Casino is America's #1 social casino experience. It's serious fun. With over 80 casino-style games to choose from, you too could win life-changing amounts of cash. Be like Mary. Log on to ChumbaCasino.com and give them a whirl. That's ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details. The voice in the preceding commercial was not the actual voice of a winner.